The Federation presents itself as a civilization that has transcended material struggle. Replicators eliminate scarcity. Energy is abundant. Housing, food, and medical care are freely available. The official story is simple. Technology solved the old problems, and people are now free to pursue meaning on their own terms. But the official story is incomplete. Daily life in the Federation is not shaped by the absence of constraint. It is shaped by the replacement of visible coercion with invisible expectation. Work remains, hierarchy persists, conformity is cultivated. The mechanisms that maintain order have not disappeared. They have been redesigned to operate without friction, without resistance, and without acknowledgement. The deeper question is not whether people have what they need. They do. The question is how meaning and purpose are distributed when survival is no longer the frame. How does a society ensure compliance when there is no paycheck, no rent, no threat of destitution? The answer lies in the architecture of daily life itself. The Federation does not police behavior overtly. It structures opportunity. It shapes identity. It cultivates belonging through participation in systems that reinforce hierarchy, purpose, and collective identity. The result is a society where freedom and obligation are difficult to separate, where the absence of material coercion does not mean the absence of social pressure, and where daily routines are as carefully managed as any resource allocation in a scarcity economy. What emerges is a portrait of life that functions less like utopia and more like a finely tuned social machine, one that does not demand obedience, one that cultivates it. The Federation economy is post-scarcity in material terms, but it is not post-work. Replicators can produce food, clothing, and tools. Energy is harvested from antimatter, fusion, and solar collectors. Medical technology can repair most injuries and cure most diseases. These are not theoretical. They are canon facts, demonstrated repeatedly across every series. But abundance does not eliminate the need for labor. It redirects it. Starfleet officers work long shifts. Engineers maintain warp cores. Security personnel patrol corridors. Medical staff treat injuries. Scientists conduct experiments. Administrative staff file reports. These are not hobbies. They are duties. They are expected, and they are unpaid. The absence of currency in the Federation is often treated as proof that work has become voluntary. But voluntarism is not the same as freedom. The question is what happens to someone who chooses not to participate. On screen, we never see that person. We never meet the human who refuses assignment, who declines to contribute, who lives entirely outside institutional structure. That absence is not accidental. It is a design feature. Daily life in the Federation is organized around contribution. Children are educated. Adolescents are tracked into career paths. Adults are assigned roles. Retirement exists, but only after decades of service. The structure is seamless. It does not feel like coercion because it is presented as opportunity, but the boundaries are firm. If you want status, you work. If you want access to prestigious assignments, you work. If you want respect, you work. The incentive is not money. It is belonging. And belonging is distributed through institutions. The clearest model for daily life in the Federation is Starfleet. Starfleet is not a military in the traditional sense, though it functions as one during wartime. It is a hybrid institution that combines exploration, diplomacy, defense, and scientific research. It is also the most visible path to status, recognition, and purpose. Joining Starfleet is presented as an aspiration. Children dream of it, families celebrate it, officers describe it as a calling, but it is also a hierarchy, and hierarchies require maintenance. Daily life aboard a starship follows strict routines. Duty shifts are assigned. Chain of command is absolute. Uniform standards are enforced. Social interaction is structured around rank. Officers eat in specific areas. Enlisted personnel are housed in shared quarters. Senior staff have access to private space. The allocation of resources is not random, it is a reward system, and reward systems shape behavior. On the Enterprise D, we see this structure in action. Picard has a ready room, a private quarters with a personal library, and access to replicators that can produce Earl Grey tea on demand. Ensigns share quarters, junior officers wait in line for holodeck time. The hierarchy is not oppressive, but it is unmistakable. Advancement is possible, but it requires years of service, adherence to protocol, and demonstrated competence. The system is meritocratic in theory. In practice, it is a filter. The filter does not select for talent alone, it selects for conformity to institutional values. Officers who question orders too often are passed over for promotion. Crew members who fail to integrate socially are reassigned. The system does not punish dissent overtly. It isolates it. It redirects it. It makes non-conformity a career liability without ever framing it as punishment. This is how daily life is shaped, not through force, but through the careful distribution of opportunity and recognition. On Deep Space Nine, the model shifts. The station is not a starship, it is a border outpost, a diplomatic hub, and a commercial crossroads. Starfleet personnel work alongside Bajoran militia, civilian contractors, and transient populations. The hierarchy is less visible, but it remains. Sisko commands, Kira advises. O'Brien maintains, Bashir treats, Dax analyzes, Odo polices, Quark profits. Each role is distinct. Each role is necessary. And each role is slotted into a larger system that depends on their continued participation. But the civilian population on DS9 reveals something the starships do not. Daily life for non-Starfleet personnel is less structured, but it is not free. Merchants like Quark operate businesses, but they do so under Starfleet jurisdiction. They pay no taxes, but they follow regulations. They negotiate with Starfleet officers for access to resources, for permits, for protection. The relationship is transactional, but the power imbalance is permanent. Starfleet does not dictate terms overtly. It does not need to. It controls infrastructure. It controls security. It controls access to the wormhole. The civilians are free to leave, but leaving means abandoning the station, the market, the network, so they stay, and they comply. This is the pattern. Freedom is real, but it is bounded. Participation is voluntary, but non-participation carries costs that are never articulated and never need to be. The broader Federation civilian population is less visible on screen, but the evidence is consistent. Earth in the 24th century is portrayed as peaceful, clean, and prosperous. Cities are well maintained. Parks are abundant. Public spaces are accessible. People pursue art, science, and recreation, but they also work. Sisko's father runs a restaurant in New Orleans. He serves real food, prepared by hand, to paying customers. Except there is no payment. Customers do not exchange currency. They simply eat. The restaurant operates because Joseph Sisko chooses to run it, because he finds meaning in the work, and because the system supports him. But what happens if he stops? What happens if he closes the restaurant and decides to do nothing? Canon does not answer this question directly, but the structure implies an answer. He would lose status. He would lose the respect of his community. He would lose the sense of purpose that the work provides. The restaurant is not mandatory, but the expectation that he will contribute something, in some form, is. The system does not compel labor through starvation. It compels labor through identity. This is the mechanism. Work in the Federation is not tied to survival. It is tied to meaning, and meaning is socially constructed. People work because it defines them, because it connects them to others, because it proves they belong. The incentive is psychological, not material. But it is no less real. The simplest reading is that the Federation has replaced economic coercion with social coercion. The shift is subtle, but the outcome is the same. People work, people conform, people comply. The question is how this system is maintained without breaking. Education is the first control point. Starfleet Academy is the most prestigious institution in the Federation, but it is not the only one. Schools exist on every member world. Curricula are standardized. Children are taught Federation history, Federation values, and Federation science. They are taught to see themselves as citizens of a larger whole. They are taught to aspire to contribution. The education is not propaganda in the traditional sense. It is immersion. It is the creation of a shared identity that begins in childhood and reinforces itself throughout life. Wesley Crusher is a useful case study. He is introduced as a teenager with aptitude for engineering and command. He spends years on the Enterprise, absorbing Starfleet culture, observing officers, participating in missions. By the time he reaches academy age, his path is already set. He applies. He is accepted. He attends. The process feels natural because it has been cultivated from the beginning. The system did not force him. It shaped him. The same pattern applies to Jake Sisko. He grows up on DS9, surrounded by Starfleet officers, embedded in Starfleet routines. He does not join Starfleet, but he becomes a journalist, a profession that still requires discipline, deadlines, and output. He chooses a path that reinforces Federation values, even while rejecting formal service. The system does not lose him, it redirects him. This is how daily life begins. Children are integrated into institutions early. They are given role models. They are given structure. They are given purpose. By the time they reach adulthood, the boundaries of acceptable life are already internalized. But education is only the first layer. The second is social pressure. On screen, we see this pressure operate through peer groups, family expectations, and community norms. Families celebrate when children join Starfleet. Communities honor officers who return home. Friends encourage each other to pursue careers that align with Federation ideals. The reinforcement is constant, informal, and nearly invisible. It does not feel like coercion because it is framed as support. But the effect is the same. People conform because conformity is rewarded. Non-conformity is not punished. It is simply not celebrated. And in a society where status is tied to recognition, the absence of celebration is enough. The third layer is access. Starfleet personnel have access to starships, to advanced technology, to missions that span the quadrant. Civilians have access to comfortable lives, but their range is limited. The most prestigious opportunities, the most exciting roles, the most visible achievements are all tied to institutional participation. If you want to explore, you join Starfleet. If you want to conduct cutting-edge research, you join Starfleet. If you want to shape policy, you work within Federation governance. The doors are open, but they only open in one direction. The pattern is consistent. Daily life in the Federation is structured to make participation feel natural, rewarding, and inevitable. The system does not demand obedience, it cultivates desire, and desire is easier to manage than rebellion. The psychological architecture of post-scarcity society is rarely examined on screen, but its effects are visible. People in the Federation do not struggle with material poverty, but they do struggle with purpose. Barclay is a useful example. He is a competent engineer, but he is socially awkward, anxious, and isolated. He retreats into holodeck fantasies where he is confident, respected, and in control. The holodeck does not solve his problems. It provides an outlet that prevents those problems from escalating. The system does not intervene until his behavior affects performance. When it does, he is offered counseling, support, and reassignment options. The intervention is therapeutic, not punitive. But it is still an intervention. The system tolerates his eccentricity only so long as it does not disrupt function. This is the boundary. The Federation allows deviation, but only to a point. Individuals can pursue unconventional paths, express unconventional views, and live unconventional lives, but they must still function within the larger structure. They must still contribute. They must still belong. The moment they stop, the system responds, not with force, with care, with concern, with offers of help that are difficult to refuse. The simplest reading is that the Federation has medicalized non-conformity. Dissent is treated as a psychological problem, not a political one. People who reject institutional life are not criminals. They are patients. And patients are managed, not imprisoned. The cost of this approach is that true dissent becomes nearly impossible. If every act of refusal is interpreted as a cry for help, then refusal itself loses meaning. The system absorbs resistance by reframing it as dysfunction, and once reframed, it can be treated, corrected, and integrated. Daily life in the Federation is comfortable, but it is also constrained. The constraints are invisible, embedded in culture, in education, in social norms, and in the architecture of opportunity. People feel free because they are not forced. But freedom and choice are not the same thing when the range of acceptable choices has already been decided. This is the mechanism. The Federation does not rule through fear. It rules through consensus. And consensus is engineered. The question is, what happens when the system is tested? The Maquis are the clearest counterexample. They are Federation citizens who reject Federation authority. They settle in the demilitarized zone, a buffer region established by treaty with Cardassia. When Cardassian forces harass their colonies, they expect Federation protection. When the Federation refuses to intervene, citing treaty obligations, they take up arms. They become insurgents. The Federation does not negotiate. It does not accommodate. It hunts them. Starfleet officers pursue the Maquis across multiple episodes and seasons. Some officers, like Ro Laren and Tom Riker, defect to join them. Others, like Chakotay, are eventually absorbed back into Starfleet after circumstances force cooperation. But the underlying message is clear. The Federation tolerates debate. It tolerates protest. It does not tolerate armed resistance. The moment citizens take up weapons against Federation policy, they are reclassified, not as political dissidents, as criminals. The response is not immediate violence. The Federation attempts negotiation, offers amnesty, and deploys officers who have personal connections to the Maquis, but when these efforts fail, force is authorized. Starfleet vessels blockade Maquis supply lines. Starfleet intelligence infiltrates Maquis cells. Starfleet officers arrest Maquis leaders. The system does not frame this as oppression. It frames it as law enforcement. And because the Maquis use violence, the framing holds. But the deeper tension is revealed in the officers who defect. Ro Laren is a Starfleet officer with a history of dissent. She is given a second chance, a posting, a uniform. She is reintegrated, and then she abandons it. She chooses the Maquis because she believes the Federation has betrayed its principles. The Federation does not mourn her, it erases her. Her career is over. Her name is removed from active rosters. She becomes a cautionary tale, not a hero. This is how the system protects itself. It does not debate the merits of dissent. It makes dissent costly. It isolates dissenters. It ensures that choosing resistance means losing everything the system provides: status, community, identity, purpose. The cost is psychological, not material, but in a society where identity is tied to participation, the psychological cost is overwhelming. Daily life for the average Federation citizen does not include the Maquis as a viable option. The path to armed resistance is too narrow, too costly, and too lonely. The system ensures that most people never reach the point where resistance feels necessary. And for those who do, the system ensures that resistance feels impossible. The consequence is that daily life remains stable, not because people are satisfied, but because the alternatives have been carefully foreclosed. The structure of civilian governance reinforces this pattern. The Federation Council is a representative body with delegates from member worlds. Policy is debated, votes are taken, decisions are implemented. The process is democratic in form, but the evidence suggests it is managed in practice. On screen, we rarely see the Federation Council in session. We see the results of its decisions, but not the debates that produce them. We see Starfleet officers briefing the Council, but we do not see citizens petitioning it. The Council is presented as a distant authority, deliberative and rational, but removed from daily life. The implication is that most Federation citizens trust the Council to act in their interest and do not feel the need to monitor it closely. This trust is not accidental. It is the product of centuries of stable governance, material abundance, and careful messaging. The Federation presents itself as a collective project, a shared endeavor where every citizen has a voice. But voices are not votes. Voices are inputs. The Council listens, it considers, it decides. And once it decides, the decision is implemented across hundreds of worlds, billions of people, and countless daily routines. The simplest reading is that the Federation Council operates more like a technocratic body than a democratic one. It makes decisions based on data, expert testimony, and long-term projections. It does not conduct referendums, it does not poll citizens, it trusts its own judgment. And because the outcomes are generally positive, because material conditions remain stable, citizens do not challenge it. But this model only works if citizens remain disengaged. The moment large populations begin to question council decisions, the system faces a legitimacy crisis. And legitimacy crises in post-scarcity societies are not about bread, they are about meaning. The Federation avoids this crisis by ensuring that most citizens are too busy, too fulfilled, or too integrated into institutional life to develop sustained political opposition. Daily life is designed to be satisfying. Work is meaningful. Leisure is abundant. Social bonds are strong. The incentive to organize, to protest, to demand change is low because the perceived need for change is low. This is the trap. A society that solves material problems without addressing structural ones creates a population that is comfortable but not empowered. The Federation does not need to suppress dissent because it has made dissent unnecessary. And it has made dissent unnecessary by making daily life pleasant enough that most people do not look too closely at how the system actually works. The question is whether this model is sustainable. Stations like Deep Space Nine reveal the pressure points. DS9 sits at the edge of Federation space, in a region where Federation authority is contested, where multiple powers compete for influence, and where civilian populations include non-Federation species with different values and expectations. Daily life on DS9 is less controlled than on a starship, but the tensions are more visible. Bajoran citizens resent Starfleet presence even as they depend on it. Cardassian visitors are monitored. Ferengi merchants operate under sufferance. The civilian population is diverse, fractious, and difficult to manage. Odo, as Chief of Security, is tasked with maintaining order without provoking backlash. He does so through surveillance, selective enforcement, and personal relationships. He does not police through force. He polices through presence. The promenade is the heart of civilian life on DS9. It is a commercial district, a social hub, and a transit corridor. It is also a controlled space. Security monitors every transaction. Sensors track every movement. Odo knows who is on the station, where they are, and what they are doing. He does not intervene constantly, but he could. The knowledge that intervention is possible shapes behavior. People comply not because they are forced, but because they know they are watched. This is the model for civilian daily life in contested regions. The Federation does not impose order through occupation. It imposes order through infrastructure. It provides services, security, and stability. In exchange, it expects compliance. The exchange is rarely articulated, but it is understood. Civilians who cooperate receive protection. Civilians who resist are isolated, marginalized, or removed. The consequence is that daily life on DS9 feels more tense than life on Earth, but the underlying mechanism is the same. Order is maintained through the careful distribution of access, opportunity, and recognition. The system does not force obedience. It makes obedience the path of least resistance. And in a post-scarcity society, the path of least resistance is also the most comfortable path. The retention reset must happen here. The question at the core of this investigation is not whether the Federation is oppressive. It is whether the absence of visible coercion means the absence of control. The answer is no. Control in the Federation is embedded in the architecture of daily life. It is structured into education, into social norms, into career paths, and into the distribution of meaning and purpose. People work not because they are forced, but because work is how identity is constructed. People conform not because dissent is punished, but because conformity is rewarded. The system does not demand obedience, it cultivates desire, and desire, once cultivated, is self-sustaining. The final piece of the puzzle lies in what happens when the system fails. The Dominion War forces the Federation to confront the limits of its model. Daily life changes, rationing is introduced, Starfleet expands conscription, civilian infrastructure is militarized. The comfortable routines that defined peacetime are replaced by wartime urgency, and the population complies. There are no mass protests, there are no refusals. The transition from post-scarcity abundance to wartime austerity happens smoothly because the population has been conditioned to trust institutional authority. This is the clincher. The Federation's control over daily life is not tested during peace. It is tested during war. And during war, the population does not resist. It mobilizes, it sacrifices, it follows orders. The decades of institutional socialization, of identity formation, of cultivated belonging produce a population that responds to crisis not with panic or rebellion, but with discipline. The simplest reading is that the Federation has created a population that is psychologically prepared for obedience. Not through fear, through loyalty. The difference is subtle, but the outcome is identical. When the state calls, people answer. When the state demands sacrifice, people sacrifice. When the state requires compliance, people comply. This is not accidental. This is the result of a system that has spent centuries shaping daily life to produce exactly this outcome. The psychological cost is invisible during peacetime. People feel free because their material needs are met. They feel purposeful because their work is meaningful. They feel connected because their communities are stable. But the freedom is bounded. The purpose is assigned. The connection is mediated through institutions. And when the institutions change, when the rules shift, when the demands escalate, the population follows. The Federation does not need to coerce its citizens because it has already won their consent. And it has won their consent by making daily life comfortable enough that most people never question the boundaries within which they live. This is the hidden mechanism. The Federation does not rule through force. It rules through satisfaction. It does not demand obedience. It designs lives where obedience feels like choice. It does not suppress dissent. It makes dissent psychologically costly and socially isolating. The result is a population that is free in theory but constrained in practice. A population that believes it has chosen its path but has actually been guided onto it from birth. Daily life in the Federation is not a failure. It is a triumph of social engineering. The system works, people are happy, society is stable. The mechanisms of control are so deeply embedded, so carefully disguised, that they are nearly invisible. And that invisibility is the system's greatest strength. But invisibility is not the same as absence. The larger truth is that post-scarcity does not eliminate the need for social control. It transforms it. The Federation has solved the problem of material scarcity, but it has not solved the problem of meaning. And in a society where meaning is the primary currency, the institutions that distribute meaning hold absolute power. They do not wield that power openly. They do not need to. They wield it through the quiet, constant shaping of daily life, through education, through social pressure, through the architecture of opportunity, through the careful cultivation of identity, purpose, and belonging. The result is a society that feels free, but is not. A society that believes it has transcended coercion but has simply replaced one form with another. A society where daily life is abundant, comfortable, and carefully managed. where people work without wages, conform without punishment, and comply without force, where the system does not demand obedience because it has already been woven into the fabric of existence. Daily life in the Federation is not a utopia. It is a mechanism, one that operates without friction, without resistance, and without acknowledgement. One that has replaced the visible chains of material scarcity with the invisible bonds of social expectation. One that has made control so comfortable that it no longer feels like control at all. And that is the most effective form of power ever devised.